Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Frank Harvey. I'm a member of the Department of Political Science, served as Chair of Political Science, 4 years as Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and now serving as the Acting Provost and Vice President Academic. And it's a role that gives me the honor and distinct privilege to welcome everyone here today to celebrate the raising of our Pride flag for 2020. And I have to say, in the midst of this COVID experience, all of us working through dozens of MS team meetings, sometimes in a single day, it's great to be able to be outside and gathering together to celebrate this important event. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize that Dalhousie University and our entire community benefit and sit on Mcdade, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, treaties the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. These treaties, as we know, did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey peoples' rights and established rules for an ongoing relationship between nations. We are very grateful at Dalhousie for our partnerships and our friendships across the university, grateful for our elders in residence, our community leaders, our Indigenous Advisory Council, our outstanding Indigenous faculty, staff, and students across Dal, our expanding Indigenous Studies program, the faculties of Arts and Social Sciences, Law, Health, Management, Medicine, Science, and other faculties. These are all really important steps in Dalhousie's ongoing effort to meet our obligations embedded in the TRC's calls to action for post-secondary institutions. And we will continue to work on and build on these critically important relationships and friendships and programs because we are all treaty people and we take these words seriously. Wilalio. Dalhousie is also very proud of the work of Dr. Afua Cooper, Halifax Poet Laureate and Professor in the Departments of Sociology and Social Anthropology and History. Proud of her contributions as chair of the Lord Dalhousie Scholarly Panel. As many of you know, the panel completed its final report, the Lord Dalhousie Report, investigating our namesake's place in the history of slavery and racism in Nova Scotia. A report that I would argue sets the standard for similar reports that other universities should engage in if and when they decide to explore their history. And I'm looking forward to working with President Saini, Vice Provost of Equity and Inclusion, Teresa Ratchak-Talley, to continuously reinforce our commitment to EDI as we move forward with not only the recommendations of the Lord Dalhousie Report, but recommendations from many other reports as well. At this point, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everybody on behalf of our president, Dr. Deep Saini. President Saini is out of the province this week, visiting his daughter, Kavita, in Waterloo to celebrate the birth of her son, Solomon. And he has asked me to send along his best wishes and a very warm welcome to Dalhousie's 2020 Pride flag raising and celebration. 2020 marks, we're not sure, but we think the 5th year of the flag raising ceremony, and we believe that it has also been raised on the Ag campus as well. And as I said, despite the COVID restrictions, it's so important for us to gather outside together today to support each other through events like this. And to help us do that, I'm joined today by a number of speakers from Dalhousie University, with our first being Jasmine Walsh, Assistant Vice President of Human Resources here at Dalhousie University. Thank you very much. Jasmine?
Thank you very much, Frank. And I just want to start by saying happy Pride to everybody at Dalhousie. I've been celebrating Pride to some degree or other with Dalhousie since a number of years before I actually joined Dalhousie to start working here as an employee within Human Resources. I was working in the private sector at that time, and the law firm that I belonged to didn't celebrate or participate in Pride activities in any way, shape, or form, and neither did at that time the Nova Scotia Bar Society or the Canadian Bar Association or any of the other professional organizations that I belonged to. But I was friends with some folks who worked at the Human Rights Office at Dalhousie, and Dal had opted in, and there was a banner, and they were walking in the parade, and they invited me to come and join because they were having such a difficulty recruiting employees from Dalhousie to participate and kind of beef up the contingent of Dalhousians walking in the parade. And so I drifted up and I kind of drifted into Dalhousie Pride celebrations, and I've been participating to some degree or other in Dal Pride activities ever since. Over the course of the past 5 or 6 years in my present role, I've had the opportunity to work on and in some cases the privilege to lead a number of initiatives at Dalhousie that I do believe make Dal a better place to work for queer and trans faculty and students. Just reference a couple of those. First, data collection of queer and trans identified folks within our Be Counted census, the expansion of our employment equity policy to include queer and trans protections for queer and trans employees as an equity group, the development of Dalhousie's first gender affirmation policy, partnership with Dalhousie and Pride at Work Canada, as well as most recently in our Your Voice survey, the collection of information from faculty and staff who work at Dalhousie about their experience of Dalhousie as a homophobic and or transphobic place to work. So that's a little bit of a backwards glance on some of the things that I think we have to be proud of in terms of the ways that we have worked to make Dal a more queer-friendly workplace. When I think about the present day and kind of Pride 2020, and I reflect on kind of what Pride 2020 means, my own perspective is that this is a time of some learning for our queer community, both off and on campus. I would say that Pride is political. It has always been political. And I think this year is a real call to action for us to learn about and to reflect on the ways that Black queer voices and Black queer activists have been instrumental in the development of Pride as a movement. And as we think about the things that we're going to be doing over the course of the next week and the kind of peculiar virtual activities that we're going to choose to participate in, either within Dal's Pride suite of activities or the host of offerings from Halifax Pride, I guess I'd invite all faculty and staff at Dalhousie to join me and reflect on the things that we don't already know about our queer community and to participate in learning activities and not just in celebratory activities. And the second invitation that I would make is that you join me in thinking about concrete ways that we can use our privilege in the most responsible way, not just during Pride Week, but throughout the entire year. I've got the privilege of introducing Dr. Teresa Rajak-Talley, Dalhousie's Vice Provost of Equity and Inclusion. And before I do that, I just would say two final things. First, Black queer lives matter at Dalhousie. Black trans lives matter at Dalhousie. And second, to close by return, happy Pride, everybody.
Hi, good day. It's indeed an honor and a joy to be part of this important Pride flag raising event here on Dalhousie's Studley campus. While I concur with everything that Jasmine has just said, I also want to add that as a university and a society, we have much to learn from the LGBTQ2+ community. As Dalhousie's Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion, in order to provide proper leadership and guidance to our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, I must also remain a student of learning. For example, celebrating Pride Month has encouraged me to learn more about the LGBTQ's history in North America and the 1969 Stonewall riots in New York City, as well as Canada's own rich LGBTQ history for over the past 50 years. This history has also made me proud and appreciative of the bravery of the LGBTQ2SIA+ community in their fight and success for the right to be their own authentic selves, for basic human rights, for equity services, benefits, and protection for themselves and others around the world. For those of you who are listening out there, let us be clear. Transgender is not a mental health disorder as declared by the World Health Organization. I have also learned that the different colors of the Pride flag that we are going to raise in a few minutes including the addition of the brown and black stripes, reflect the diversity that makes up the LGBTQ2SIA plus community and their intersectionalities. This simple but important act teaches us what creating a more diverse DAL should look like. One that recognizes the uniqueness of individuals and groups in diversity while striving for equity and inclusion. I would like to use this opportunity to rededicate and commit to intensifying Dalhousie's efforts to creating more accessible and inclusive programming that supports our LGBTQ2SIA plus communities, to educate allies, and to continue to create opportunities for the visibility and dialogue with the LGBTQ2 plus SIA members without fear. We cannot forget that Dalhousie University sits on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. As we celebrate Pride Month and the raising of the Pride flag, we must also acknowledge the Two-Spirit and Indigenous LGBTQ2SIA plus individuals and communities of Nova Scotia and the Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance. Lastly, in the past few stressful months, we at Dalhousie have had to deal with two pandemics, COVID-19 and systemic racism, both of which have negative impacts on the LGBTQ2SIA plus communities. Today, we commemorate Pride Month within these broader contexts, but the history of the LGBTQ2SIA plus educates us that protests against discriminatory police violence were also held as far back as 1969 with many Black and transgender trans women and the LGBTQ peoples world over. So today, we would like to use this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to the LGBTQ2SIA community for not only fighting for your humanity, but fighting for all humanity. Congratulations, celebrate today, the month, the life. Stay well and be safe. Thank you.
Hi. Happy Pride. My name is Omi Sheree Dryden, and I'm the James R. Johnston Chair in Black Canadian Studies in the Faculty of Medicine here at Dalhousie University. We currently work and live in Chibuktuk, Halifax, the traditional unceded territory of the Maliseet, whose ancestors, along with the Mi'kmaq and Passamaquoddy nations, signed peace and friendship treaties with the British Crown in the 1700s. But please note, that was about 140 years before the end of slavery. Halifax was imposed upon Chibuktuk in 1749, and its enslaved African people who were used to dig up roads and build the city, including much of the citadel. On the southern shores of the Bedford Basin, Mi'kmaq folks shared land with Black people, and this allowed Africville to be founded in the mid-1800s. African Nova Scotians' lives matter. African Nova Scotians' queer and trans lives matter. I'm a Black queer femme, scholar, and I respectfully acknowledge our collective ancestors, Indigenous, Black, queer, trans, genderqueer, and Two-Spirit, who were born here, forced here, and continue to make home here. I also respectfully honor Black, queer, and trans people who have been killed at the hands of violence, including encounters with police. And I honor Black, queer, and trans people who continue to fight against anti-Black racist homophobia and police brutality. I want to name Tony Mcdade, who on May 27th was killed by police, a Black trans man, Tony Mcdade, just 2 days after the murder of George Floyd. And yet we know less about Mr. Mcdade. And furthermore, when Mr. Mcdade died, he was further harmed after his death by being misnamed, dead-named, and misgendered in the press. As Black people, we have a historical experience of having our names taken from us to be named by others for their use and to our detriment. As a Black trans man, Mr. Mcdade deserved dignity in his death, and his name and gender respected. On June 8th and 9th of this year, 2 Black trans women were murdered in the United States. It's important to know who they are and demand better for all of our communities. Here I think of the work of Faith Nolan, a musician who lived in the Nova Scotian home for colored children for the first 4 years of her life. And Faith Nolan states that along with being queer, we also carry the institutionalized burdens of racism, classism, ableism, and sexism. And until all of us have full equality, none of us do. I think of the work of Bayard Rustin, a Black gay man who was a close advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. Rustin planned the 1963 March on Washington. Although Martin Luther King Jr. received a lot of pressure to distance himself from Bayard Rustin, Mr. King refused. And in this act, Mr. King also demonstrated that all Black lives matter. Professor Angela Davis, a Dalhousie University 2018 honorary degree recipient, an activist scholar, a writer, and former member of the Black Panthers, recently participated in the online YouTube Black Queer Town Hall on June 21st, in which she describes herself as, and I quote, communist, abolitionist, internationalist, anti-racist, anti-capitalist, feminist, Black queer activist, pro-working class, revolutionary, intellectual community builder. Dr. Davis, throughout her work as an activist and a career as a scholar, has dedicated herself to prison abolition and states that the struggle for gender equality, gender diversity, and LGBTQ rights has been championed by trans people who are incarcerated. There's an importance of understanding that we all live complicated lives. This is especially important. Audre Lorde described herself as a Black lesbian feminist warrior mother. She was also a writer and activist, and she wrote that there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. This is especially important in moments like this. There are actions taken daily, major and minor actions, that seek to perpetuate LGBTQ folks as a single issue. It's why this flag with Black and brown stripes is so important. It's not enough to look outward and suggest that homophobia is a single form of discrimination that happens elsewhere in predominantly Black and brown communities. We must continue to identify how racist homophobia happens in our own queer and trans communities and workplaces. We must not shy away from the fact that the first time Black Lives Matter Toronto heard screams of all lives matter was from white queers. We must not shy away from the fact that Black Lives Matter continues to be addressed as a non-queer issue. We must acknowledge and be committed to understanding that racism is a queer issue and that there is a necessity to address anti-Black racism in queer spaces, scholarship, research, and workplaces. Perhaps we can focus on why colonialism, racism, and anti-Black racism are fights that continue for queer and trans folks. Be committed in taking actions to combat and disrupt them. And then, maybe then, we can come together and celebrate. Happy Pride. I'd like to introduce Tammy.
Hi, I'm Tammy Meredith, and I'm proud to be a queer woman, and I'm proud to be a trans person. I'm here representing the Queer Faculty and Staff Caucus. We provide a forum for all faculty, staff, and administrators at Dalhousie to serve the Dalhousie community and improve the working and learning environment for all. The Queer Faculty and Staff Coalition is here year-round, helping to build a community where all, regardless of sexual orientation, gender, gender expression, gender identity, right, feel heard, affirmed, and respected. To some, Pride is a yearly event, but I'd just like to point out that as members of the queer community, Pride is year-round for us. We are proud of who we are all year, and we celebrate our diversity 24/7, 365 days. Right? I'd like to comment that being queer affects more than just the members of the 2S LGBTQ community. Right? Progress on social justice affects all Canadians, and it's beneficial for everyone, regardless of your identity. Every single Canadian is unique and different in some respect, right? And we should not be limited in any way by our differences and our uniqueness. Right? So Pride is a time to recognize, no matter who you are, that being different, being queer, and being yourself is okay. And that diversity adds and strengthens our campus, our country, and our planet. So we at the Queer Faculty and Staff Caucus wish to promote awareness and set a positive example that encourages diversity and equality year-round. I'd just like to say that you can find us, if you're looking for us, on the Dalhousie website, dal.ca/sites/QFFC. Right? Pride is a time to celebrate our achievements and progress towards equality, diversity, and inclusivity. So it's fitting that Pride is so close to Canada Day, where we can recognize that though we have a long way to go, Canada is in the forefront and has come a long way to becoming a country where human rights are protected and increasingly supported. Pride is a time to reflect on how each of us can help in the fight towards making our world better and safer for those who identify as 2S LGBTQ, as Black, as Aboriginal, or as a member of any other marginalized community. Right? All of us working together can achieve more than a few individuals working alone. A lot of what we've been talking about and the other speakers have talked about is about the queer and marginalized communities. I'd like to take a brief moment to talk about the straight community. And I'd like to say that Pride is a time when we can say thank you to all those who have been allies and supportive, to all those who have made a difference and helped others throughout the year. And so from the queer community, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who has been a supporter and an ally. The queer community intersects every other community. So at this time, the Queer Faculty and Staff Coalition Caucus would like to offer its support for everyone fighting racism, sexism, or any other form of discrimination, right? We support the efforts of the Black and Aboriginal communities in their struggle against racism, oppression, and marginalization. No matter how someone identifies with respect to sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, age, religion, or any other factor, we all have the right to be accepted, respected, and safe. The current situation in the world right now suggests that that is otherwise and that we have work to do. Pride is a time to recognize that we have this work and that we need to keep moving forwards. As well, I'd like to say that we want to thank everyone for their sacrifices and efforts to help fight the spread of COVID-19 and save lives. While Pride is a time that we typically get together, this year it's a time to be physically distant and to stand together, but 6 feet apart. I'd like to end by introducing our next speaker, Truly Love, a student at Dalhousie and president of DalOut. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and to all the speakers before me, I feel like I couldn't say it any better. There is so much happening in the world right now. I knew that as part of my position with DalOut that I would likely be at a flag raising this year. I didn't picture that it would look a lot like this, and I'm sure that goes the same for everyone. I know if you're anything like me, sitting at home, it might be feel kind of weird on how to celebrate Pride this year. It almost might feel wrong or as if we shouldn't because of everything that's going on. But I think, as folks have said before me, it's really important to remember how Pride started. Pride is a protest and always has been. It is to commemorate our fight for our rights, the fight that we still have to continue, and the fight for communities that may not be our own. I think that one of the best ways we can celebrate Pride this year is to reach out, to support others, whether they are in our community or they're not. To stand together, to educate ourselves, to radicalize ourselves in the ways that those who came before us in the fight had to. I think it's important to still take time to be proud in ourselves, to celebrate, to feel joy, even though that may feel awkward at this time when so much is going on, there's so much loss in the world. But I think it's important to remember that there are many things to be joyful for. One of them for me is definitely the community that we have here in Halifax. There are so many organizations that, despite COVID-19, have been working so hard to make sure that we are still together. Distance doesn't mean without each other. And, I think it's important to take time to be a part of our community, to celebrate those organizations, to celebrate all of the people, including many of the folks here today, doing the amazing work to make sure that while we are at all places in the country, while we are, in maybe even all over the world, we are still able to come together. We are still able to celebrate Pride. And I know that while Dalhousie, in my opinion, has a lot of work to do when it comes to supporting their 2S LGBTQ+ community, as well as other marginalized students, I think that for me, coming to Dal was an amazing experience. And I know that for many students at home, it has been as well. I come from a small rural community in northern Alberta, and moving to Halifax was one of the first times I was ever able to express myself. Raising the flags behind me means so much more than just celebrating Pride. It's an act towards showing that we belong in spaces that we weren't designed to belong. And that means the world to so many of us. I know it meant so much to me knowing that there was a community here, that Dalhousie was a supportive school, for me to be able to come here. And I think that it's all right, as much as we recognize there is change that needs to happen, that for many of us that is the experience, and that we're grateful to either be here in Halifax or to go to Dalhousie as a student or to even be in Canada. And I think that in this time it's important to be able to celebrate and fight for change. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. And I just wanted to say to everyone watching at home, happy Pride. I know this isn't probably how you imagined it being. It may feel like his Pride was canceled this year and that it's not happening. But it is. And I encourage everyone to turn to their online communities, to look for all the amazing things that are happening. Just because it's different doesn't mean that it's not wonderful, and doesn't mean that we can't celebrate who we are and the community that we belong to. And yeah, honestly, just happy Pride. Thank you for so much to everyone spoke before me. I have the joy of being last to go in our lovely line of speakers. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. So on behalf of DalOut, thank you. Happy Pride. I hope everyone at home is staying safe, staying healthy, and enjoying this wonderful time of year, and maybe getting some wonderful sunshine today. And I would like to ask Dal Safe and Dal Security to come raise the flags behind me.